I remember the first time I painted my face white, the smile arching in bright reds and blacks. It was June 1973, and I was standing in the battered hallway of my Chicago bungalow, my domain, my stage. By day, I was John, the contractor, the polite neighbor who offered free estimates with a firm handshake. By night, I became Pogo the Clown, whisking balloons into elaborate animals and teaching kids to juggle at backyard birthday parties. Every morning, I would scrub the grease off, slip back into khakis and suspenders, and head to work. The neighbors never batted an eye when I pumped their pipes or laid new tile. They waved as I climbed down from my van, toolbox in hand, greeting their wives with a gallant nod. They had no reason to suspect the crawl space beneath my floorboards harbored secrets darker than any horror flick. Behind that door, hidden by half-worn boards and a lock I alone possessed, lay the world I built after dusk. I surveyed my handiwork with an almost paternal pride. The narrow trench I'd scraped near the furnace, the careful reinforcement of the joists, the innocuous oil-stained rug that disguised my deeds. Those boards weren't just wood, were my covenant of silence. When I'd finish a party as Pogo, children cheered and parents clapped, praising my artistry. "He's so talented," they said. "Such a lovely man." They doted over the painted face and floppy shoes, never asking how I filled the wicker baskets with trick-or-treat candy in July. They never wondered why the garage door creaked like a rusty gate, or why, at night, the furnace growled for no reason at all. But I was always to people. John worked a respectable job. Pogo wielded laughter like a tool. Only in cave quiet darkness did the other me emerge, hungry, driven by impulses so raw they felt almost sacred. It was then I dug. I dug with the same fervor I used to jackhammer concrete. With each shovelful of earth, I felt closer to the truth of who I was and what I wanted. Tonight's party had ended hours ago. My car, painted garishly with multicolored polka dots, rested in the driveway. Inside, I scrubbed off the last of the grease paint, feeling the mask peel away like a second skin. I locked the front door, lit a single bulb in the crawl space, and descended into the cold embrace of isolation. The real show, I thought, is just beginning. They always came willingly, some with the glimmer of hope in their eyes, others shy and unsure, clutching paper resumes, dirt under their fingernails, and ambition in their hearts. Boys from bus stops, parking lots, convenience stores, teenagers, mostly, some even younger, a few homeless, others just trying to help their families, all of them looking for one thing: work, and I gave it to them. That's how I justified it at first. Helping out the neighborhood, I told myself, giving these kids a shot. My contracting business was booming in those days, and nobody asked questions when I said I needed strong backs and cheap labor. I'd hand them a card with PDM contractors printed bold across the top, tell them I was hiring, come by. Tomorrow, I'd say with a grin, we'll talk about your future. But I already knew their future. I'd stand at the door with my usual charm. Parents home, I'd ask if they were young. Most of the time, they weren't. Sometimes, they lied. I never minded. A six-pack in the fridge, a little weed rolled in the kitchen drawer. They'd relax quickly. I'd get them talking. They always talked too much. I used to do magic tricks. I'd tell them, "You like clowns?" They'd laugh, uncomfortable but curious. "Watch this," I'd say, pulling out handcuffs from the drawer, cheap steel ones I used in my act. "Bet. You can't get out of these." I'd grin. They never could. The moment they clicked shut, something inside me snapped into focus. It wasn't anger. It wasn't lust. It was ... control. Pure, uninterrupted control. Like I had stopped time and made the world mine. Thrash, curse, beg. Some cried for their mothers. Others tried to fight, to run, to scream. I was used to it by then. The basement was soundproof enough. The neighbors never heard. The furnace covered the noise. And besides, they trusted me. I was John. I was Pogo. I was the man who brought balloons and laughter. But under that smile was something they never saw coming. I remember one of them, Danny, maybe, or Chris. Names blur after a while. He tried to bargain with me, even after. The gag tried to scream something through the tape. I watched him like a scientist studying a specimen. I saw the moment he realized no one was coming for him. The crawl space was nearly full by then. I had to dig deeper, shift things around. Every new body made it harder to breathe down there, harder to move, but I couldn't stop. Not yet. Not while I was still getting away with it. Not while the world still believed in the clown. Upstairs, my phone rang. A neighbor asking if I'd MC a block party next month. I smiled. Of course, I said. Pogo will be there. Sometimes I still hear them at night. The laughter, not screams, laughter. Faint and muffled like it's seeping up from the floorboards, floating through the vents, haunting my ceiling like smoke. At first, I thought it was the furnace acting up. Then I realized it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside me. Pogo laughs the loudest. He comes to me in the mirror now. In brief flashes, white painted cheeks, oversized teeth, red smeared lips stretched into something unnatural. He watches me shave, watches me sleep. He never blinks. When I stare into the reflection long enough, I can't tell if it's Pogo wearing my face or me wearing his. I played him so well, didn't I? The local papers loved me. John Gacy, the man who does it all. Contractor, party clown, precinct captain for the Democratic Party. I shook hands with First Lady Rosalind Carter, smiled for photos with judges and commissioners, wore my lapel pin proudly. A trusted man, a leader. In the community, meanwhile, they were buried 6 feet beneath me. I learned to compartmentalize. I'd spend the afternoon talking about zoning permits at city council meetings, then come home and mop blood from the concrete. The scent stayed in my nostrils, a metallic tenth that never left. I scrubbed until my knuckles split, but the ghost of it lingered in the paint, the wood, the air. Some nights I couldn't sleep. I'd sit in the living room, lights off, listening to the faint hum of traffic. My mind would wander. Did I miss something? Did I leave a shoe, a belt? Had I cleaned the cuffs properly? But nothing ever came back to haunt me. The cops never knocked. I got bolder. I remember the first time I buried 2 in one night. My arms trembled from digging. The soil was wet, heavy, and slick with old roots. I was sweating through my shirt, but I couldn't stop smiling. Pogo was with me that night. I didn't wear the costume, but I felt him there, cheering me on, clapping silently like a ghost in the rafters. I started keeping souvenirs, wallets, IDs, a couple of driver's licenses I tucked inside the tool chest in the garage. It made me feel like their stories still belonged to me, like I'd absorbed them. They were mine now. Every last one of them. In the morning, I'd put on a fresh shirt, wipe the dirt from beneath my nails, and wave at the neighbor mowing his lawn. "Morning, Bill," I'd call out, smiling. "Looks like rain." The crawl space was never meant to be sacred, just a place to store junk, rusted pipes, old paint cans, insulation scraps. But over time, it became my cathedral, my sanctuary. I crawled through its narrow guts like a priest through a sacred tomb, every footstep deliberate, every breath drawn from cold, still air. The earth accepted them, one by one, no judgment, just silence. I had to start mapping the layout. There were too many now to keep track in my head. Some overlapped, I hadn't dug deep enough. The soil was loose in places, soggy in others. Once, I nearly slipped face first into a shallow grave that hadn't settled yet. Their ribs pressed against the dirt like the bones of buried animals. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I swore I heard them shifting. Not their ghosts, the bodies. I started using lime, but that only helped so much. The stench was evolving. A sick, sour sweetness, like spoiled meat wrapped in damp towels. I began smoking more just to mask the air. I kept the windows open, blamed the furnace, blamed the dog. No one ever questioned it. The boys, they were all different, but they sounded the same near the end. Doesn't matter where they came from, bus terminals, fast food joints, even from inside my own contracting crew. Some of them I knew by name, others I never asked. It didn't matter. Not when they were down there. Not when they became part of the crawl. But one night, it felt different. It was a boy named Robert, 17, clean-cut, trusted me. Said he wanted to learn construction work, maybe start his own crew one day. His laugh was sharp and kind, reminded me of something I'd lost but couldn't name. For a moment, just a moment, I hesitated. He noticed. "You okay, Mr. Gacy?" he asked. I smiled. "Yeah, Robbie, just tired." I gave him a beer, loosened his trust, told him about Pogo, showed him the handcuffs. He laughed, even after. I locked them round his wrists. He laughed. He thought it was part of the clown act. Said I was crazy. That was the last time I ever heard him speak. I buried him deeper than the rest, near the southeast corner. The dirt there was drier. I remember staring down at the hollow I'd dug and whispering something I don't fully recall. Maybe an apology, maybe a prayer. But the crawl space didn't care. It accepted Robert like it did the others, without resistance, without question. And that's when I realized I wasn't just hiding bodies. I was building something, a kingdom, and I was its king. I always knew it couldn't last forever. The walls were closing in, not physically, not yet, but I felt it in small ways, whispers in the air, eyes that lingered too long. The kid at the pharmacy who avoided me now, the way the paperboy stopped, leaving the paper right on my step. My gut told me something had shifted. I just didn't know how much. Then the cops came. They didn't knock down the door or read me my rights. Not yet. It started simple, polite. One detective, maybe two, asking if I'd seen a boy named Robert Piest. Said he'd gone missing after work. Said someone mentioned I was the last to see him. I smiled, warm, rehearsed. "Robert," I said. He stopped by for a job. I gave him a card. Didn't see him after that. They nodded, took notes, asked a few more questions. I offered coffee. That's what being Pogo taught me. Always keep smiling, make them feel safe. But when they left, my hands were already shaking. Not from fear, not yet, from awareness. I knew they'd be back. I'd seen that look before, in the eyes of the boys just before they understood what I really was. That sudden clarity, that gut-deep panic. It was in the detective's eyes now. They started following me, watching my house from across the street, sitting in unmarked cars, pretending not to notice when I waved. They thought they were subtle. They weren't. I played dumb, took them coffee once, even joked with them. "You guys ever need a party? Clown, let me know," I said. "Pogo's available." They didn't laugh soon. I could barely breathe without feeling watched. I started drinking more, sleeping less. The crawl space felt heavier, like the dirt was pushing up instead of settling down. I imagined them moving again, whispering beneath the floor. It was in my head, I told myself. Just nerves. But something was changing. Then they got a search warrant. They came in hard. This time, gloves, boxes, shovels, flashlights. They tore up my floors, opened my crawl space, and found what I'd been hiding all along. It didn't take long. One body, then another, then more. They stopped counting out loud after 10. I watched from the front porch, handcuffed, eyes blank. They'd finally seen what lived under the mask. Not John the businessman, not Pogo the Clown, just me and everything I'd buried. The cell was cold, but not colder than the crawl space. They gave me a blanket, a metal sink, a cot bolted to the wall. I sat there, staring at the cracks in the concrete, thinking about how quiet it was. No footsteps, no voices, no furnace to cover the sound, just silence, the kind that doesn't leave. They thought I'd break, that I'd sit there and cry, maybe beg, but I didn't. I'd been planning for this moment in my head for months, maybe years. I just didn't expect it to feel so still. When the detective came back in, the same one from the Piest case, he looked tired. His tie was loose. His voice was calmer than I expected. No yelling, no slamming fists, just questions. "How many, John?" I smiled. "Too many to remember," I said. It wasn't a confession, not yet. It was a test. I wanted to see what they knew. How deep they'd gone, if they'd found the last ones. The ones I buried deeper. The ones I thought no one would ever touch. He slid a photo across the table. A boy's face. Young, scared. Probably from a missing persons report. I didn't recognize him, or maybe I did. By then, the faces had begun to blur. The names, the dates. They weren't people anymore. They were moments. Shadows in the dark. Echoes in the earth. The detective leaned in. "Tell us what you did, John." I looked at him, straight in the eyes. And for the first time, I let the mask slip, just enough. "You ever dig a grave in frozen ground?" I asked. "Takes hours. Your hands go numb. But after a while, the cold feels good, keeps the smell away." He didn't speak after that, just stared, like he was looking into something he couldn't understand. They called in doctors after that, psychiatrists, forensics experts. Everyone wanted to study me, pick apart my brain like I was some puzzle with a missing piece. They used words like sociopath, narcissist, antisocial personality disorder. None of it mattered. I knew who I was. I was John. I was Pogo. I was the one they never saw coming. At night, I'd lie back on the cot and close my eyes. And sometimes, if I concentrated hard enough, I could still feel the dirt under my fingernails, the weight of the shovel, the laughter echoing up through the floor. They thought catching me would end it, that pulling me out of that house would kill the thing inside. But Pogo was never just makeup and shoes. Pogo lived in me, and he still does. They gave me a stage, I don't think they meant to, but they did. The courtroom was packed on the first day, reporters elbowing each other for space, sketch artists shading my jawline like I was some kind of celebrity. Flashbulbs popped like confetti. I sat in a suit, not shackles, clean shave, hair combed. Calm, I nodded to the jury, winked at a camera once. The judge scowled. They didn't know it, but they were giving me the spotlight again. Not as a clown, no, but as something bigger. The monster who wore a smile. The contractor with 29 boys beneath his floorboards and more stories than anyone could stomach. The crowd leaned in every time I opened my mouth. The country couldn't look away. My lawyer tried the insanity route. John doesn't know right from wrong, he told the jury. He's mentally ill, a victim of childhood trauma. They brought in psychiatrists. Some said I was paranoid. Others said I was aware, calculating. One called me the embodiment of evil in human form. I just sat there, folding paper napkins into birds. They showed the photos, bones, ropes, handcuffs, a clown suit in a plastic bag. The crawl space diagram covered in red X's. One juror vomited. Another started crying and had to be replaced. I remember thinking, you asked for the truth. This is what it looks like. And yet, even then, some of them didn't believe it. One woman outside the courthouse yelled, "He's innocent." Another mailed me love letters, marriage proposals. People sent money, art supplies. Some wanted to interview me for books, for movies. They didn't understand I wasn't a character. I was the author. The prosecutor stood up and called me a sadist. He took pleasure in pain, he said. He murdered boys and slept on top of their graves. He turned to the jury and asked them one question. Do you want this man to ever walk free again? I smiled, not because I was proud, not because I thought I'd get away with it, but because I knew even if they locked the door forever, even if they buried me under the prison, the name would live on. Pogo, Gacy, the killer clown. You don't forget names like that. Men rot in here. Some scream through the nights. Others wither in silence. They shuffle through the same hallways every day, dragging their chains like broken dogs. But not me. I adapted. I always do. Death row wasn't the end. It was just a new stage, a smaller one. No bright lights, no balloons. But I still had an audience, guards, inmates, reporters, even artists who wanted to paint me. You'd be surprised how quickly a murderer becomes a myth when you put a number next to his name and call him history. I painted Pogo, mostly clowns, bright colors, happy scenes. Some had hidden eyes in the background. Some had smiling children, holding balloons in a blood-red sky. Nobody ever asked what they really meant. They just sent checks and wrote letters. Collectors, creeps. Fans.I sold those paintings from my cell. Signed them in the corner with a careful flick. J.W. Gacy. Sometimes I laughed when I heard how much they sold for. Thousands, tens of thousands, for the work of a man they'd called a demon. But in here, I was just John. I kept my head down, ate quietly, read the paper. Wrote letters in the early mornings when the lights were still dim and the hallway outside my door was empty. No screams, no footsteps, just me and the scratch of pen on paper. I had a television for a while. I watched documentaries, saw actors play me like I was some kind of puzzle. What made him snap? They'd ask. How could a man become that monster? But they never really wanted the truth, because the truth is boring. There was no voice in my head. No childhood trauma that made me kill. No divine curse. I wasn't abused by a traveling circus clown or bitten by a rabid dog. I was just ... me. And that's what scared them the most. That a man could mow his lawn, go to church, vote, make people laugh, and still be evil when the lights went out. That I could shake your hand with one and strangle your son with the other. They wanted me to weep, to regret, to beg. But regret is for the weak, and I never begged. The countdown began, years dragging into months, months into days. Appeals filed and denied. The governor's office stopped answering. One day, the guard tapped the bars and said, May 10th, 1994. That's it, Gacy, I nodded. About time, I said. They gave me a final meal, a bucket of fried chicken, fried shrimp, French fries, a pound of strawberries. I didn't eat much, not because I was afraid. I just wasn't hungry. My stomach had gone quiet. My mind, though, loud as ever. People had gathered outside. Protesters, reporters, candlelight vigils. Some prayed, some shouted for blood. Some even wore clown noses, mocking me with cardboard signs that read, No more laughs, Gacy. I smiled. I'd always drawn a crowd. They asked if I wanted a priest. I told them no. I didn't need saving. The system had already decided what I was. All that was left was the curtain call. I sat on the edge of the bed in my cell and stared at the wall, counting the cracks in the cement one last time. I thought about the crawl space, the cold of the dirt, the silence of the boys. I wondered if they'd be there, waiting for me, not in heaven or hell, just ... somewhere. But no one waits for monsters. The guards came just after midnight, calm, methodical. They didn't speak unless necessary. One of them held a clipboard. Another carried restraints. I stood on my own, walked the hallway like it was a parade route. A dead man walking the final march of Pogo the Clown. The execution room was small, cold, bright. They strapped me to the table. I didn't fight it. Why would I? I'd outlived most of the men I'd buried. I'd painted their memories in acrylic, sold their deaths in brushstrokes. I'd become legend, the kind of name whispered at sleepovers and carved into pop culture. With blood-stained teeth, a man in a suit leaned in and asked, "Do you have any last words?" I looked him in the eye and said, "Clear as day, kiss my ass." That was it. No apology, no tears, just one final laugh from a man who'd always known. He was untouchable until now. They started the injection. I felt the chill run through my veins, like ice spreading through a hollow pipe. The ceiling above me blurred. The edges of the world softened. The voices around me faded. I didn't see flames. I didn't see light. Just darkness, deep, silent, and complete. But before it swallowed me, I swear I heard it. The faint sound of children laughing. I'm gone now, dead, buried, cremated, whichever you prefer. But the funny thing is, they still talk about me, still print my name, still whisper about the crawl space and the clown and the crimes that turned stomachs and froze a nation in its tracks. You thought it ended when the poison hit my veins. No, that was just intermission. The news ran wild. TV anchors stiff in their chairs, announcing my death with solemn voices and darting eyes, like they were relieved, like they were safe now. But deep down, I knew the truth. They needed me. For weeks, every channel carried the story. Killer clown executed. victims remembered, secrets unearthed. They aired specials, invited psychologists, interviewed former neighbors who suddenly remembered odd behavior. One woman even claimed she once smelled something strange in my yard, 20 years too late. And then came the books, the documentaries, the college lectures, my mugshot on shirts, my paintings on auction blocks, crime fans collecting like I was a rock star. They hated me, but they couldn't look away. A museum displayed the original floor plans of my house, complete with body locations marked in red. Tourists came just to stand near the lot where my home once stood. Some left flowers for the boys. Others just took selfies. That house, they tore it down, bulldozed the whole thing like they could erase it, poured fresh concrete, built something new on the bones of the old. But history doesn't work that way. You can't silence the ground. You can't bury memory, especially not when you've already buried 33 beneath it. Families spoke, some forgave, most didn't, and who could blame them? I stole something from them that can't be replaced. Not with justice, not with closure, not even with time. But here's the part that always made me smirk. Despite everything, people still invited clowns to their birthday parties, still laughed at the makeup, the red noses, the balloon animals, as if they'd forgotten that sometimes the thing wearing the smile is the thing you should fear most. You locked me in a coffin, but you kept me alive in headlines. You called me a monster, but made me immortal. Because deep down, you wanted to know, how could someone like me exist? And now, you do. They turned me into fiction. You see it in the movies now. The smiling killer, the man with two faces, a friendly mask on the surface, a graveyard underneath. Clowns stopped being funny after me. I killed the laughter, painted over it with blood. I've seen them all, the films, the knockoffs, the twisted carnival horror shows. They copy my face, my act, my grin. They rename me, but never really change me. Call it Pennywise, Twisty, Art the Clown, doesn't matter. They're just echoes of me, puppets with bloodied gloves dancing across your screen. They try to separate me from the fantasy, to say that was just a character. Gacy was real, he was different. But they can't. I infected the genre. I warped innocence. And now every time a red balloon floats down a dark hallway, people shiver, not because of Stephen King or cinema, but because somewhere beneath their skin, they remember, this actually happened. Parents got paranoid. Boys weren't allowed to walk home alone. The world tightened its leash on trust. Friendly neighbors suddenly weren't just friendly, they were suspects. Men who volunteered at youth events, coached Little League, or shook hands at community barbecues had to prove they were just normal, because I had been. I was the man. Next door, the guy who fixed your gutters, who brought cake to charity drives, who smiled at your son and gave him a job. America learned something from me, something ugly, that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears aftershave and a county badge. Sometimes it's the guy holding the church, raffle tickets, or posing beside the mayor in a Polaroid. They still teach my case in criminal psychology classes. They run behavioral profiles against my history. FBI agents say my name like a textbook chapter. John Wayne Gacy, organized killer. High-functioning psychopath, classic narcissist. They dissect my life like a corpse, cut it open, examine the rot. But for all the analysis, all the lectures and Netflix specials, they always circle back to the same disturbing conclusion. No one ever suspected me. Until it was too late. I've thought about them more times than I care to admit. The faces blur sometimes. Names fade into the background noise of my mind, but their weight never leaves me. Not because I feel remorse. No, that's not it. It's because they are. The reason I exist in this story. The reason people remember me. Each one came with a story. A hope, a dream, however small. Some were runaways. Some were just looking for a chance. A few smiled at me like I was a friend. That's what made it easier. The ones who trusted me, believed in me. I stole that from them, and maybe that's the cruelest part. I told myself there were shadows, just moments of flesh and bone. But the truth is, they were real. They had families who waited, who searched, mothers who cried, fathers who cursed the day I knocked on their door, brothers who wondered if they missed a sign, a scream, a warning. I buried them in the crawl space, a tomb beneath my home, a secret room of silence. They were never just numbers, not to me anyway. Each one marked my descent further into the dark. I sometimes wonder if they still speak beneath the dirt, if their voices rise in whispers when no one listens, if the crawl space is alive with memories that refuse to die. Did I kill hope along with them? Maybe, but it wasn't just about death. It was about control, power, the hollow feeling inside that nothing else could fill. So many nights I sat alone in that basement, surrounded by the evidence of my sins, feeling the weight of what I'd done and yet craving more. The monsters inside me never slept. They say evil has many faces. I had two, one for the day, one for the night, one that laughed, one that silenced, and now all that remains are their shadows and the echo of my mask. I once believed the mask would protect me, that if I smiled wide enough, laughed loud enough, danced clumsily enough as Pogo, the world would never see what lurked beneath. The paint would hide the scars, the grin would drown out the screams. The red nose would be a shield between me and judgment. But masks slip, they crack, they fall. In the end, all that remained was silence. The silence of the crawl space, the silence of empty rooms, the silence of a world that finally knew. They say, I was a monster, a nightmare made flesh, but I was just a man who mastered the art of disguise. I lived two lives, each feeding the other. The clown who entertained children and the killer who buried secrets. And though my story ends in darkness, the echo of my laughter still lingers in the shadows, because evil, once born, never truly dies. It just waits for its next mask.